When the last flare of the sun drowned behind the hills of Latium, the marble of Rome began to change its skin. The heat that had ruled the day retreated, leaving behind a faint scent of dust, olives, and the sea. Columns turned golden, then gray, then almost translucent, like bones in the half-light. From the high terraces of the Palatine, one could watch the entire city sinking into a slow exhalation, the empire preparing to dream. As darkness deepened, voices thinned. The chatter of the forum faded first, then the hammers, then the merchants calling out their final prices for figs and fish. A soft tide of silence crept through the streets, broken only by the occasional rattle of a cart wheel or the cry of a distant guard. It was the hour when the city, once a roaring heart of power, became a living memory, a pulse beneath the stones. In the villas of the rich, slaves moved quietly through torchlight, their shadows long against frescoed walls. Beds were made with woolen sheets, stuffed with straw or feathers if fortune allowed. Oil lamps flickered near the household shrines. Small offerings of wine and bread were placed for the gods of sleep and hearth. In those moments, the line between prayer and exhaustion blurred. To lie down in Rome was not merely to rest, it was to surrender to the unseen. The Romans believed that dreams were messages. To close one's eyes was to open a gate, to the will of the gods, to the whispers of ancestors, to omens that might decide the fate of a family or an empire. Sleep was not innocent. It was divine territory. Senators feared what might come in the night, just as soldiers feared the silence before dawn. Even emperors, who commanded armies and cities, could not command their own dreams. Outside, Rome's breath changed rhythm. The Tiber moved like a slow serpent beneath the bridges, swallowing the reflections of torches and stars. Stray dogs wandered among the marble ruins of temples, sniffing at offerings left to decay. Somewhere, a poet muttered verses to the night, his voice barely louder than the wind through the cypress. For the poor, there was no bed to sanctify their sleep. They curled beneath arches, on temple steps, between the warm stones of public baths. Some slept in shifts, some not at all. The night in Rome was a privilege. Peace was something to be bought with silver or stolen from exhaustion. Yet even they dreamed. Even the beggars on the edge of the Subura, wrapped in the smoke of their small fires, carried within them visions of better worlds, of cool water, of shaded gardens, of a silence they had never known. And so, the empire slept unevenly. The patricians behind heavy curtains, the slaves in corners, the soldiers on their cloaks, near the walls. The city itself, half waking, half lost in reverie. From above, the moon drifted over the 7 hills like a quiet witness. Somewhere in the Palatine, a woman turned in her sheets and whispered a prayer to Somnus, god of dreams, asking not for peace, but for forgetfulness. As the night thickened, Rome entered its other life. Markets became labyrinths of shadow. The scent of baked bread and spiced wine gave way to that of wax, smoke, and night-blooming herbs. Lovers met in gardens, philosophers in porticos, thieves in alleys. Not all slept. Some sought what the day could not give: freedom, darkness, the intimacy of the forbidden. There was a peculiar stillness to those hours, as though the air itself were listening. The rustle of togas, the quiet dripping of water from fountains, the faint hum of insects, each sound carried meaning. It was said that the gods walked more freely at night, disguised as beggars, priests, or women in veils. To meet one in the darkness could mean madness, or enlightenment, or both. Slowly, the torches dimmed. The last cups of wine were emptied. The laughter that once echoed in marble halls dissolved into the rhythm of breathing. The city that had conquered the world surrendered, at last, to the small, ancient act of closing its eyes. And as sleep took hold, in the villas, the taverns, the barracks, and the gutters, Rome became silent. The kind of silence that hums with unseen life. Beneath it, dreams gathered like fog, filling the chambers of emperors and slaves alike. Somewhere, far beyond the reach of reason or power, the empire dreamed of itself, eternal, luminous, and already fading. The Roman night was not empty. It pulsed within the walls, in the dim hearts of villas and insulae, where bodies surrendered to the slow tides of rest. Behind curtains woven from Egyptian linen or coarse wool, the chambers of sleep awaited their ritual. They called them cubicula, small, enclosed rooms with walls painted in red, gold, and sea blue. There was little air, yet the air was alive, scented with olive oil, ash, and the faint sweetness of crushed myrtle. Lamps burned low, casting trembling halos across the frescoes. The light moved over painted gardens, over figures of Venus and Bacchus, over sleeping nymphs and silent gods, echoes of the dream that was about to begin. Beds stood like altars, some carved from marble, others simple wood. They were not only places of rest but of ceremony, of love, of birth, of death. The Romans lived horizontally as much as they lived upright. Here, in these narrow sanctuaries, decisions were whispered that could shake provinces. The bed was not a retreat, it was the stage where the empire turned inward. Those who could afford softness filled their mattresses with feathers or straw mixed with herbs, lavender, mint, and rue to calm the spirit. Others lay upon woven ropes or coarse hides. And yet, regardless of comfort, all carried the same vulnerability. To sleep was to risk being seen by something greater than oneself. Many Romans placed small charms beside their heads, bronze figures of Mercury, fragments of coral, eyes carved in ivory. The amulets guarded the thin border between the sleeper and the abyss. In the villas along the Tiber, where the air was warm and wet, the rich slept lightly, their dreams stirred by the hum of insects and the lapping of the river. Curtains swayed in the breeze, carrying with them the faint sound of distant laughter, a banquet not yet ended. In those moments, one might wake and feel that Rome itself was breathing through the walls, whispering fragments of its secret life. For the wives of senators and merchants, the night brought its own politics. Sleep came late, after the perfume was washed from their skin, after the jewelry was set aside like armor. Their minds moved between prayer and suspicion, of lovers, of fate, of the future. Some prayed to Juno Lucina for protection, others to Venus for the kind of peace only beauty can give. Even in the hush of midnight, the empire's weight pressed upon them, every household a miniature Rome, every marriage a fragile treaty. Meanwhile, in the humbler quarters of the Suburra, the bedchamber was a corner of survival. Families slept together on mats, limbs tangled like roots. The smell of smoke, sweat, and bread hung heavy. The fire never fully died. Its embers glowed like small red eyes, keeping away the spirits of the restless dead. Here, sleep was not luxury but escape. For a few hours, they could forget the endless day, the noise of markets, the heat, the debt, the hunger. Yet even there, the divine crept in. Dreams did not discriminate. The goddess Somnia visited the poor as often as the powerful. In dreams, the beggar might become a soldier, the slave might stand before the emperor. When morning came, they would return to their hunger, but for that brief interval of sleep, the boundaries of the empire dissolved. Outside, the city was a vast organism, each sleeper a cell in its dreaming body. From the Palatine to the Aventine, from the marble villas to the wooden balconies of the tenements, the same breath rose and fell. Rome slept unequally, but it slept together. Somewhere, in a quiet villa garden, a philosopher lay awake on a stone bench, unable to surrender to oblivion. He watched the moonlight spill across the leaves, silvering everything it touched. To him, the world seemed divided into two empires, the empire of the living and the empire of the sleeping. In one, men built monuments, in the other, they built eternity. He thought of how even the gods must dream, how Jupiter himself, heavy with the weight of thunder, must sometimes close his eyes. Perhaps, he wondered, the entire cosmos was just one vast slumber, and we, its flickering dreams. As the hour before dawn approached, the lamps in the villas dimmed one by one. Slaves extinguished the last flames, their gestures slow, practiced, almost tender. The rooms sank into darkness. For a few precious moments, Rome was completely still. And then, just before the birds began to sing, the philosopher finally drifted into sleep. His last thought was that the night of Rome was endless, not because it lacked a sunrise, but because it was buried within every human heart, waiting to awaken again. When darkness fully settled over the city, Rome began to speak in another language. It was not the voice of the Senate or the roar of the markets, but a softer, stranger chorus, a breathing made of stone and shadow. The day belonged to law and order, the night belonged to mystery. The first sounds came from the edges, from the countryside where the wind brushed the cypress groves, carrying with it the far-off cry of a wolf. Then the city answered, the slow splash of the Tiber against its stone banks, the clatter of a gate closing, the distant hooves of a messenger riding under the moon. These sounds traveled like thoughts, echoing through the marble canyons of streets, gathering meaning as they went. In the Suburra, the narrow streets never truly slept. Somewhere, a child coughed. A woman sang softly to her infant, her voice half lullaby, half prayer. A drunk laughed and stumbled against a wall. From a nearby tavern, a reed flute played a tune that had already lived 100 years. The air smelled of wine, smoke, and warm bread, mingled with something ancient and human, the scent of survival. Above, on the Palatine Hill, the world was different. There, the night was polished, deliberate, almost sacred. The courtyards of the patricians murmured with fountains and the rustling of silk. Slaves moved silently along corridors, their bare feet whispering against mosaic floors. Behind veiled doorways, lovers spoke in quiet tones, the kind that vanished before they were fully heard. Somewhere, a senator dictated letters by lamplight, the scratching of the stylus on wax faint and rhythmic, a heartbeat of ink and intention. The night in Rome was a mirror of its society, layered, uneven, infinitely alive. In the distance, the watchmen called out the hours. They moved through the streets in pairs, carrying torches that sputtered like dying stars. All is well, they called, though often it was not. Their voices rose and fell across the sleeping city, a reminder that even in rest, Rome demanded vigilance. From the baths came the sound of water, soft, eternal, flowing through channels beneath the earth. Even at night, some men lingered there, seeking the comfort of warmth and silence. Steam curled through the air like spirits. A drop fell, then another. Each echo was a meditation, each ripple a hymn to the body. And then there were the temples. When all else grew quiet, they spoke the loudest, though not in words. The flames of the altars crackled, and the faint scent of burning myrrh drifted upward. Somewhere in the temple of Vesta, the sacred fire burned without pause, guarded by the Vestal virgins. The faintest murmur of their prayers slipped into the wind and wandered across the city, unseen yet felt. Rome's heart, they said, beat in that flame. For those lying awake, these sounds became companions. The city was a vast cradle of murmurs. The creak of wooden shutters, the shiver of a chariot wheel, the distant rumble of thunder beyond the hills, all wove together into a kind of nocturnal symphony. Some found it comforting, a reminder that life never ceased. Others found it haunting, the whisper of eternity pressing close to their ears. In the poorest alleys, the night could be cruel. Rats scurried across the stones, thieves moved like phantoms. The watchmen's torches rarely reached there. But above the roofs, the stars burned with an indifferent purity, the same stars that looked down upon emperors and beggars alike. Their silence was the truest sound of all, the one that reminded Rome of its smallness. And yet, for every sound that belonged to fear, there was another that belonged to peace. The sigh of a sleeper turning in his bed. The soft hum of bees kept in rooftop hives. The far-off splash of fish in the river. The city breathed in harmony with its people, its pulse rising and falling with the rhythm of countless dreams. Sometimes, when the moon was high and the air perfectly still, even the guards paused in their rounds to listen. They swore they could hear the stones of the city murmuring to one another, the voices of old generals, lost lovers, and forgotten slaves speaking through the marble itself. Whether this was truth or imagination did not matter. In Rome, belief was as real as stone. By the hour before dawn, the music began to fade. The flute stopped. The last reveler stumbled home. A final cart rattled down the Appian Way, and then, for a heartbeat, Rome held its breath. The sound of the world was reduced to one, the quiet beating of a city's heart beneath the stars. And in that silence, the gods listened. Sleep, in ancient Rome, was not an escape from life. It was a dialogue with the invisible. When the body surrendered to darkness, the mind entered a realm ruled not by emperors or laws, but by signs, omens, and gods. The Romans believed that dreams were messages, that within every shadow lay a whisper from something divine. And so, each night, millions of eyes closed across the empire not in ignorance, but in expectation. They called it somnium, the sacred space between the heartbeat and eternity. To dream was to be visited. A message could arrive from Jupiter, or from the shade of one long dead. A mother might see her lost son. A soldier might see his fate written in blood upon a river. The air of the sleeping chamber became the thin border between worlds. In the villas of the powerful, dreams were not left to chance. Priests of the augurs studied them, interpreters of sleep who could turn a whisper into a verdict. When a senator dreamt of fire, they would speak of ambition or of the wrath of Mars. When an empress dreamt of birds, they would read omens of fertility or loss. No empire could afford to ignore the night. There are stories, ancient, persistent, of how the dreams of a few shaped the destiny of all. It was said that before his death, Caesar dreamt of walking in the clouds, crowned with light, only to see himself pierced by falling stars. His wife, Calpurnia, dreamt the same night of a bleeding statue, his image dripping crimson across the marble. She begged him not to leave their home that morning. But dawn, proud and golden, broke through the curtains, and duty called. Augustus, too, was haunted by visions. In his youth, he dreamed of a torch blazing between his mother's legs, the prophecy of his own birth, the birth of Rome's new era. The people loved these tales, because they made sleep sacred, because they made fate visible. Not all dreams were grand. In the simple homes along the Tiber, fishermen dreamt of calm waters. Wives dreamt of husbands returning safe from war. Children dreamt of bread, of sunlight, of laughter. Even those who had nothing found in sleep a secret abundance, a life untouched by debt, cruelty, or hunger. Dreams, in their quiet mercy, made equals of them all. But there were darker visitations too. The Romans spoke of the incubus, a spirit that came upon sleepers, pressing the breath from their chests. They spoke of the lemurs, the restless dead who wandered through dreams, begging for remembrance. Not all who closed their eyes found peace. For some, the night was a battlefield of the soul. Philosophers argued endlessly about what dreams were. Seneca thought they were reflections, the echo of the mind's own voice. Cicero saw them as fragments of divine truth scattered like sparks across the darkness. The Stoics said they were simply the residue of thought, yet even they admitted that sometimes, the residue could burn. In the sanctuaries of healing, the Asclepia, those who were sick came to sleep upon sacred ground. They would lie upon the cool stones, waiting for the god to visit them in their dreams. In the morning, the priests would interpret what had been seen: a serpent, a stream, a hand of light, and from these symbols they would prescribe the cure. To sleep there was to surrender to something holy, to trust that the unseen might mend what the day could not. There were also those who sought dreams deliberately. They fasted, prayed, inhaled the smoke of herbs and resins. Some believed that wine opened the gates more easily, others swore by silence. In the countryside, old women kept their own rituals, whispering names of spirits into the dark, drawing circles of salt, asking the night to speak. Sometimes it did. Sometimes it answered in terrible ways. Yet beyond fear and superstition, there was a gentler truth. The Romans, for all their noise and conquest, understood that life was not whole without mystery. They knew that what happened in the silence of sleep was as important as what happened in the glare of the sun. Every morning, when they awoke, they carried pieces of the night back into the world, fragments of vision, fragments of themselves. And so, as the city slept, the dreams of Rome drifted together like mist. They moved through walls and courtyards, over temples and fountains, binding the rich and the poor in one silent communion. In those hours, there was no emperor and no slave, no victory and no loss, only the vast, collective breathing of a civilization at rest. Before dawn, when the stars began to fade, the dreams began to thin. They slipped from memory like water through the hands. Faces blurred, voices vanished. A woman turned in her bed and tried to hold on to the image of a child she had lost. A soldier, far from home, woke with tears on his face, not knowing why. An old man, for the first time in years, slept without pain and smiled at something he would never recall. And as light crept once more across the marble and dust, Rome awoke, carrying within it the quiet residue of the divine. Not all of Rome slept beneath marble ceilings. When the lamps of the Palatine dimmed and the perfumes of senators' chambers sank into the night, the rest of the city, the greater, unseen Rome, remained awake, or at least half awake. It was a city of laboring shadows, servants moving through corridors with bowed heads, slaves sleeping in corners near the thresholds of other people's dreams. For them, night was not a time of peace. It was an extension of duty, a second shift performed in silence. They were the invisible hands that cooled the lamps, that drew the curtains, that whispered, Domini omnia parata sunt, before slipping back into darkness. They were the watchers of the night, not by choice, but by the unending rhythm of command. The wealthy dreamed, the poor endured. Some servants slept in narrow alcoves near the kitchen, where the smell of smoke never left their hair. Others curled beneath stairways, wrapped in coarse blankets, their bodies sore from labor. The lucky ones had straw pallets. The unlucky, only the warmth of each other, or of the stones that still held the memory of day. In those rooms, breath was the only luxury shared equally. The slaves who served in great households lived between two worlds, awake in one, dreaming in another. By day, they bore the eyes of their masters, every gesture measured, every mistake punishable. But by night, when the torches were extinguished, the boundaries blurred. In the dark, they whispered their real names, the ones taken from them when they were sold. They told one another stories from distant lands, of blue mountains, of gods who still remembered them, of rivers where the moon sank whole and came up silver. To dream was the only rebellion permitted. And yet, even sleep could betray them. A startled cry in the night might wake the master. A restless movement could draw suspicion. Some slept as if already dead, unmoving, shallow, disciplined by fear. Others dared to let the night have them completely, to fall into deep, merciful oblivion. For a few short hours they were free. In the taverns and workshops, sleep was something shared, a patchwork of limbs and breathing. Workers collapsed beside their tools, their hands still stained with bronze or wine. The night was thick with fatigue, but also with a strange tenderness. Someone would throw a cloak over another's shoulders. Someone would murmur in their sleep, calling for a mother long gone. Rome was a city of conquest, but also of countless small compassions unseen by history. Sometimes, when the streets were empty and the moon high, a slave might wander from the house where he served. Barefoot, he would walk to the edge of the city, to the ruins, to the fields where the first mists began to rise. There he would sit, listening to the sound of the wind in the grass. It was not freedom, but it felt close enough to imagine it. He would close his eyes, not daring to dream too vividly, and for a few heartbeats, he would belong to no one. Children of slaves often slept beside their mothers in the servants' quarters. They grew up in the rhythm of footsteps, whispers, and hidden tears. For them, the night was a school, teaching silence, patience, endurance. Yet it also gave them something no law could take, the ability to imagine. The child who fell asleep listening to his mother hum an old song would carry that melody for life. One day, perhaps, he would hum it to his own child, somewhere far away, in a different world. Among the forgotten, there were those who did not sleep at all. The guards, the bakers, the midwives, the prostitutes, people whose lives unfolded in the hours others feared. The bakers' ovens glowed like hidden suns. The smell of rising bread drifted through the sleeping streets. Midwives answered quiet knocks, carrying their lanterns to the homes of the poor, where life and death often arrived together. And the women who waited in the shadows of temples offered warmth for coins, their laughter soft and hollow as wind through reeds. They, too, dreamed, though rarely at night. For every marble palace, there were 1,000 forgotten rooms. For every citizen's rest, a dozen restless souls kept watch. And yet, when dawn came, when the first light touched the roofs and the roosters cried from the hills, the city awoke as one. The masters would stretch and yawn, calling for their attendants, unaware that the same hands which poured their morning wine had not known sleep at all. There is an old Roman saying, Somnus equus est. Sleep is equality. But it was never true. In Rome, sleep was a mirror of the empire itself, some deep and safe, others shallow and trembling. Still, within those fragile hours, the slaves of the empire created a secret civilization of dreams, a realm where no chain reached, where memory was still theirs, and where the gods, perhaps, listened differently. Sometimes, when the masters slept too deeply, a slave would pause by their bedside. Just for a moment, they would watch the stillness of the one who commanded them. The great man's chest rising and falling, his mouth slightly open, his brow softened in peace. And the slave would realize, here, in this breath, in this sleep, there was no difference between them. For both would one day close their eyes forever. And in that instant, the night felt almost just. When the sun surrendered to the horizon and the last blush faded from the rooftops, Rome did not fall asleep, it shimmered. Flickering torches lit the marble arches of the public baths, and the air itself seemed alive with whispering heat. The moon, pale and perfect, hung above the domes like a silver coin tossed by some lazy god. The Roman baths were never merely about cleanliness. They were a kind of theater, a mirror of civilization, where body and soul met in ritual. By day, they were filled with senators, merchants, philosophers, men of rank and reason. But by night, when the crowds had gone, they transformed into something softer, almost sacred. The marble corridors echoed differently in the dark. The fountains whispered instead of sang. The lamps burned lower, their flames long and slow, casting liquid light across the walls painted with fading gods. Servants moved silently between rooms, carrying fresh oils, folded towels, bowls of steaming water. The scent of myrrh and cedar clung to the air. In the tepidarium, the warm chamber, a few late visitors lingered, their voices low and drowsy, words blending with the mist. There, sleep came gradually, as warmth sank through the skin and blurred the border between waking and dreaming. To lie in the baths at night was to feel time itself dissolve. Outside, the empire breathed in millions of hearts. Here, within these walls, only the slow heartbeat of water remained. Some came to forget. Some came to remember. A retired soldier might sit half submerged, eyes closed, feeling the ache of old wounds melt into the heat. He would think of his comrades lost on distant fields, men whose names no one spoke anymore. The vapor rose around him like ghosts. For a few moments, they were all together again. An old poet might dip his fingers in the pool, tracing invisible words across the surface, verses for no one, offered to the silence itself. Perhaps he once recited in crowded forums, but now his audience was only the echo of dripping water. Yet he smiled, because here, where sound and steam mingled, his words seemed eternal. In another corner, two lovers met, secretly, dangerously. Their voices barely more than breaths. They spoke not of passion but of fear, of how easily desire could become a sentence in the courts of the empire. But when their fingers touched beneath the water, all laws dissolved, and for a heartbeat they belonged only to the night. The slaves who tended the fires rarely entered the pools, yet they were the unseen guardians of this peace. Down below, where the hypocaust roared, the furnace that kept the baths alive, they worked half-naked in the glow of coals, feeding the fires through the long hours. The sound of crackling echoed like distant thunder. Sweat stung their eyes, smoke filled their lungs, but sometimes, when no overseer watched, one of them would pause and close his eyes. Through the stone above, he could faintly hear the soft splash of water, the murmurs of men and women relaxing. It sounded like another world. He imagined the feel of that water on his skin, cool, cleansing, infinite. And in that imagination, he bathed too. Above, the moon drifted higher. Its reflection trembled on the surface of the great pool, broken by ripples that spread like breath. Some said the moon was sacred to Diana, goddess of the hunt and of women. Others whispered it was the eye of a god who never slept. But for the lonely souls of Rome, it was a companion, constant, silent, kind. In the frigidarium, the cold chamber, the air was sharper. Those who entered did so with a shiver, the shock of cold pulling them back from the brink of dream. Steam turned to frost upon the marble. Yet even here, in the chill, there was beauty, the purity of breath, the clarity of thought, the awareness of being alive. A philosopher once wrote that sleep and death are brothers, gentle twins who take us by the hand. But in the baths, people learned that warmth itself was a kind of mercy, that the body could be a temple not of pride, but of surrender. To float in the water beneath the moon was to admit, just for a moment, that all glory fades, that even emperors will one day dissolve into silence. When the last bathers departed, the attendants doused the lamps one by one. The great halls sank into twilight. The steam thinned. The night grew cool again. Outside, the streets of Rome were quiet, except for the distant cry of a dog, the turning of a cart's wheel, the murmur of the Tiber rolling endlessly past the city's edge. One could almost believe that Rome itself slept, that the noise, the power, the cruelty of daylight had retreated. But if one listened closely, one would hear it, beneath the calm, the heart of the empire still beating, still dreaming of eternity. And above it all, the moon watched, patient, unblinking, as it had for centuries, as it would for centuries more. Power does not sleep easily. For those crowned by the empire, night was not rest but reflection, a long, unblinking silence filled with the ghosts of decisions, the weight of eternity pressing softly upon the mind. In the marble palaces of the Palatine Hill, the emperors of Rome lay surrounded by stillness. Gold flickered faintly from the walls, where painted gods watched from shadow. Outside, the fountains murmured as if speaking in a language no human could understand. The night wind slipped through the colonnades, cool and scented with cypress. Augustus, the first of them, often slept lightly. A man who had conquered chaos only to discover that peace, too, can be exhausting. He would wake before dawn, sit by the open window, and listen to the city's breathing. Rome itself was his creation, his child, his burden. And sometimes, in those half-lit hours, he wondered whether he had built an empire or a cage. He dreamed of a small village on the banks of the Tiber, of boys laughing, of the smell of earth after rain. In the dream he was not emperor, not god, just a man who could walk barefoot through the mud. When he woke, the feeling lingered, soft, impossible, cruel. Caligula dreamed differently. His nights were feverish storms, crowded with visions. He saw oceans swallowing cities, heard laughter from invisible mouths. They said he spoke to the moon as to a sister, that he would stand on the balcony, naked beneath its light, whispering secrets only he and the sky could hear. The moon was his confidant, his mirror, his madness. When he slept, he dreamed of being infinite, and when he woke, he tried to make it true. Claudius, old and uncertain, dreamed of books, of scrolls that unraveled endlessly, filled with names of those forgotten by history. He, who stuttered in daylight, spoke fluently in dreams. Sometimes he saw the gods laughing, not cruelly, but knowingly, as if reminding him that even emperors are only dust rearranged by destiny. Nero's dreams were full of fire. Even before Rome burned, he saw flames in his sleep, towers melting, marble glowing red, the sound of music rising above screams. But in the dream, the fire was beautiful. It danced. It purged. It made the city new. He would wake trembling, unable to tell if he had glimpsed prophecy or guilt. And sometimes, when he could not bear the silence, he would summon musicians at midnight and play, as if music could drown the voice of conscience. For some emperors, sleep was mercy. For others, it was punishment. Domitian slept with a dagger beneath his pillow, haunted by omens, unable to trust even his own shadow. Trajan dreamed of roads, endless roads that stretched beyond the edges of the map, filled with soldiers marching toward a dawn that never came. Hadrian saw walls, rising and falling across the earth, as if the empire itself were breathing through him. But perhaps the strangest dreams belonged to Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher on the throne. He saw himself walking among stars, not as a ruler, but as dust among dust, light among light. The gods did not speak to him, they simply looked on with quiet acceptance. When he awoke, he would write what he remembered, short sentences, almost prayers. He called them meditations. They were not for the empire, but for the silence within him. He once wrote, "As the sleeper dreams of worlds, so the living dream of life. Both will wake, one today, the other to eternity." The emperors had their palaces, their guards, their crowns. But night stripped them bare. In sleep, the titles dissolved. The divine became human again. The man who commanded legions found himself alone before his own heart. The man who called himself a god remembered, with quiet terror, that gods too could vanish. And yet there was peace in that vulnerability, the same peace that touched the humblest farmer asleep beneath the stars. For all their splendor, the emperor's dreams were not so different from the dreams of slaves, of lost homes, of vanished mothers, of rivers of light. Sometimes, in the hour before dawn, when even the guards dozed by their posts, an emperor would rise and walk barefoot through the corridors. He would pause by the window and look out over the sleeping city, the domes, the roofs, the flicker of a few late lamps by the Tiber. He would feel, perhaps, for the first time that day, utterly alone. And in that loneliness there was truth. Rome belonged to him in daylight. But at night, it belonged to everyone. To the bakers and the slaves, to the poets and the lovers, to the stray dogs and the river itself. The empire, vast and immortal, was only another sleeper under the moon. And when the first light touched the horizon, when the stars began to fade and the city stirred again, the emperor would return to bed. He would lie down, close his eyes, and surrender, not to power, not to glory, but to the only kingdom no man could ever rule, the kingdom of dreams. Rome never truly slept. Even when the lamps dimmed and the fountains fell quiet, something in the city's blood refused to rest. The empire itself was a living creature, its heart 1,000 streets, its breath the murmuring of the Tiber, its pulse the footsteps of those who could not, or dared not, close their eyes. At night, Rome was a labyrinth of sound. The slow creak of carts carrying grain from Ostia. The cry of a wine cellar calling from a shadowed corner. The distant clang of a blacksmith's hammer, where a man worked late for a single coin more. And beneath it all, the low hum of voices, not loud, but endless, like the whisper of the sea. The city glowed faintly in the dark. Torches burned at temple gates, and oil lamps flickered from tavern windows. Moths swirled in the warm air, fragile as thoughts. Somewhere, a flute played, hesitant, mournful, perhaps for a lover, perhaps for no one. The streets of the Sabura never slept. It was the heart of the people, a maze of alleys where merchants, thieves, prostitutes, and poets lived side by side. There, the night was not peace, but life. The scent of roasted nuts mingled with that of smoke and wine. Dogs barked. Children laughed. Laughter and danger shared the same rhythm. In one small tavern, a group of sailors drank by the light of a clay lamp. They had come from Alexandria, and their stories smelled of salt and distant suns. They sang softly in their foreign tongue, voices thick with homesickness and joy. The innkeeper's daughter, half asleep, leaned against the doorway, listening. She did not understand their words, but she felt the longing in them, a longing as old as the sea itself. Further uphill, in a quieter street, an old philosopher walked alone. He carried no lamp. He preferred the darkness, said it helped him think. His sandals brushed the dust as he moved, whispering like dry leaves. Above him, the moon hung between the columns, casting pale rivers of light along the road. He paused near a statue of Jupiter and smiled faintly. "Even you," he murmured, "must be tired of being awake." The philosopher believed that the city never slept because its people feared silence. In sleep, the mind wanders where it cannot lie. And so they filled the night with noise, with talk, with song, with fire, anything to keep from hearing the echo of their own souls. Down by the river, the ferrymen waited for late travelers. Their boats drifted like black leaves upon the water. Coins changed hands, oars dipped, ripples spread beneath the starlight. The Tiber reflected the moon's pale face, but broke it into trembling pieces. Some said the river had its own memory, that every reflection it ever held sank slowly into its depths, layer upon layer, until the very bottom was heavy with dreams. Near the Circus Maximus, stray dogs prowled among the ruins of yesterday's games. The scent of blood still lingered faintly in the sand. Above, in the deserted stands, a single man sat alone, his cloak wrapped tight against the chill. He had once been a charioteer, famous and adored. Now his hands shook with age. He came at night to listen, to the ghosts of the crowd, the roar that still lived in his head. It was not fame he missed, but the feeling of being seen. Beyond him, near the Aventine Hill, the temples of the gods slept too. Even Jupiter's priests rested. The braziers dimmed, their smoke rising like prayer into the sky. Only a few candles burned before the image of Vesta, goddess of the hearth. The flame there never died, tended by the Vestal virgins, who guarded Rome's eternal fire. One of them, restless, knelt beside it, and watched the way the flame bent when she breathed. She wondered if the gods ever slept, or if they too longed for rest. Far above, in their villas, the wealthy dreamed in silence, their windows shuttered, their guards posted, their fountains still whispering. But even their gardens seemed awake, the cypress trees moving slightly in the wind, the statues gleaming faintly beneath the moon. Somewhere in one of those rooms, a young patrician wrote poetry by lamplight, the ink drying slow as thought. He was writing not for the Senate, not for fame, but for the quiet comfort of his own heart, a heart too full to sleep. And through it all, the moon watched. It passed over the Sabura and the Palatine, over temples and taverns, over rich and poor alike. It saw the lovers hiding in courtyards, the thieves creeping through shutters, the slaves dreaming on cold floors. It saw the city's pulse, never still, never silent. As the hours deepened, a mist began to rise from the river. The torches flickered and died. The last tavern doors closed. The philosopher's footsteps faded. And yet still, Rome did not sleep. It dreamed. Its dreams were made of stone and shadow, of triumphs and tears. In them, gladiators still fought beneath the roar of invisible crowds, priests still raised offerings to absent gods, and lovers still whispered in the dark. Every street, every archway, every ruined column held a memory. And when dawn came, when the first light touched the roofs of the Palatine, the dream did not end. It merely changed its form. The sleepers rose. The city woke. But in the echo of every footstep, in the breath of every word, the night still lingered, soft, invisible, eternal. For Rome was not a place. It was a consciousness. A dream that refused to die. In Rome, sleep was never merely human. It belonged to the gods, the spirits, the invisible arbiters of fate. To lie down in the dark was to step into their domain, a world both tender and merciless, where the mortal and the divine whispered across the same threshold. Somnus, the god of sleep, reigned over this hidden kingdom. He was said to glide silently through the city's bedrooms, unseen yet palpably present. Some believed he carried a gentle breath, soft as down, which could bring the most troubled mind to rest. Others whispered that he sometimes lingered too long, turning dreams into visions, visions into warnings, until the sleeper awoke trembling, certain that the gods had touched him. His children, the Somnia, were legion, thousands of dream spirits who slipped between mortals' heads like threads of smoke. They brought prophecies to emperors and auguries to farmers alike, their forms shifting, sometimes winged, sometimes faceless, sometimes like long-forgotten friends. A young patrician might dream of a shadowed figure pointing toward the Tiber, signaling a fortune he could not yet understand. A slave might see a glowing hand in the night, guiding him through impossible darkness towards safety or ruin. The Romans feared more than sleep itself. They feared the spirits that lingered in its shadows. The lemurs haunted those who died unjustly, restless and bitter. If one fell asleep with unfinished vengeance, the dead might enter, whispering in unintelligible voices, shaking the body in the night, demanding remembrance. Homes were sprinkled with salt. Iron doors were bolted. Charms of coral and bronze were placed under pillows. Yet even these protections could not always keep the shadows at bay. Hypnos' Roman cousin, the god Morpheus, was said to shape the dreams themselves, sculpting them from memory, fear, and desire. He spoke without words, bending reality with soft hands. To meet him in a dream was a rare gift, or a perilous curse. Soldiers before battles, senators before critical votes, and even emperors themselves sometimes sought his counsel in sleep. Morpheus' visit could bring clarity or madness. The line between prophecy and imagination was never clear. The gods of sleep were both indifferent and intimate. In some homes, small altars were placed beside beds. Votive offerings of wine, bread, or coins were left to Somnus, to Hypnos, to the countless spirits that haunted the night. Families prayed for protection, for peaceful rest, for dreams that might guide the young or warn the old. The emperor, surrounded by gold and marble, would make similar offerings, though his prayers were for empire, for the delicate balance of power, for messages hidden in the shadows. Yet not all visitors of the night were benevolent. Incubi and nocturnals prowled the dark edges, spirits that fed upon fear, sorrow, and desire. To fall asleep careless was to risk their attention. Some slaves whispered prayers to the hearth, to the shadows themselves, begging for immunity. Some patricians slept with daggers beneath their pillows, convinced that dreams could carry poison as easily as wisdom. And yet, for all this, the Romans cherished the night. Sleep was a mirror of existence, fleeting, fragile, full of hidden meaning. To close one's eyes was to touch eternity, even for a few heartbeats. A mother would breathe over her child, whispering to Somnus, asking that the darkness be gentle. A soldier would lie in his cloak, half expecting Morpheus to guide him safely through tomorrow's battlefield. A poet, in a silent villa, would reach for the shadows as inspiration, letting the gods shape verse and melody while the city slept. The gods of sleep and shadow were impartial, but they were real. They reminded every Roman, high and low, rich and poor, that the night belonged not to them, but to something greater. To ignore it was to invite misfortune, to embrace it was to find clarity. In dreams, the hierarchy of Rome dissolved. Slave and emperor, poet and soldier, beggar and priest, all were equal before Somnus. And so, Rome moved quietly through the night, watched over by its unseen guardians. Its citizens rested, trembled, dreamed, feared, and hoped, each breathing in time with the pulse of the divine. Every exhalation, every heartbeat, every soft whisper of sleep was an act of communion with something vast, eternal, and unknowable. When dawn approached, the gods withdrew. Somnus lifted his breath, Morpheus' shadows dissolved, the lemurs returned to their resting places. Yet their presence lingered in the memory of the sleepers, in the heaviness of eyelids, the half-remembered visions, the quiet sensation that one had touched a world beyond their own. Rome awoke. Lamps were lit. Streets stirred. Fountains flowed. Markets opened. And still, beneath the brightness of day, the city carried with it the residue of the night, a city never fully asleep, forever guided, haunted, and inspired by the gods of sleep and shadow. Slowly, imperceptibly, the night began to fade. The moon, pale and steadfast, lowered its gaze, and the stars surrendered to the approaching light. Shadows lengthened, stretched, and then collapsed into themselves. A faint glow appeared on the horizon, brushing the distant hills with pink and gold. The city stirred. At first, it was a breath, a tremor beneath closed doors. Lamps guttered, dying like soft hearts. Fountains whispered one last secret before their voices became ordinary again. The Tiber rolled silently, reflecting the awakening sky. In the Subura, a child shifted in a straw mattress, rubbing eyes still heavy with dreams. A mother rose, carrying water and bread, her steps careful not to wake her sleeping neighbors. Merchants unlocked shutters, letting in the first smell of sunlight, the scent of bread baking in ovens along the narrow streets. Even the dogs, who had prowled all night, settled into dozing again, lulled by the promise of a new day. In the palaces of the patricians, the change was quieter, yet no less profound. Emperors stirred beneath silken sheets, rolling over with the weight of dreams still pressing on their minds. A philosopher, long awake in thought, finally allowed his eyes to close as the first golden rays reached his window. Lamps were extinguished. Slaves began the day's labor, but even they felt the subtle shift. The world had tilted again toward life. The baths, once alive with night's soft symphony of heat and whispering water, were empty. Marble corridors cooled. Steam lifted from the pools and vanished into the morning air. But the memory lingered, The touch of water, the hush of fountains, the echo of laughter and longing, all suspended in the heart of the city like a secret kept only by stone and mist. The gods, too, seemed to pause. Somnus receded, Morpheus vanished, lemurs returned to their hidden corners. Yet the residue of their presence remained in the hearts of Romans, guiding their steps, their words, their fears, their joys. In dreams, the city had touched eternity. In waking, it carried the memory of it. Even the smallest details held significance. The first bird that sang from a rooftop heralded the day. A cart rattled over cobblestones, waking sleepers with the promise of work and sustenance. The aroma of coffee, if it existed, would have mingled with bread and fresh water. The ordinary became sacred again simply by its return. Rome had awoken, but Rome had changed. Every life that had touched the night, the emperor, the slave, the poet, the child, the mother, the lover, carried fragments of that darkness forward. In the Forum, senators walked among the ruins and columns, discussing laws, taxes, and conquests. But within each of them lingered a subtle echo of the night, a whisper that not everything could be controlled, a memory that some knowledge belonged only to silence. And in the streets, the poor rose to meet their daily toil, each step heavy with the ghosts of dreams that had offered comfort, warning, or hope. The city itself stretched. Walls and arches yawned beneath the sun. Domes glimmered. Markets opened. Horses trotted. Lamps were replaced by the golden glow of day. And yet, somewhere beneath it all, beneath marble, stone, and soil, the pulse of the night still beat quietly. For Rome, awake or asleep, never truly rested. Even in daylight, the echoes of dreams lingered. Lovers stole glances remembered from their midnight meetings. Soldiers carried faint shivers of prophecy across their backs. Philosophers paused in their steps, catching the residue of insight only night could grant. Slaves remembered, if only for a heartbeat, a freedom not theirs to keep but theirs to imagine. And so, the city thrummed with life. Its heart was awake, its body moving. But its soul, built of shadows, dreams, whispers, and the eternal vigilance of gods and spirits, remained unbroken. Rome had risen from its nocturnal depths, but the night had left its mark forever. For in the empire of the living, the night always lives on. Every heartbeat, every step, every breath carries a fragment of darkness, a memory of what it means to dream, to fear, to hope, and to exist in a world where stone and soul, empire and heart, night and day, are inseparable. And so Rome awoke, whole and fractured, ordinary and infinite, beneath the rising sun. Even as the sun climbed higher over the rooftops, the city of Rome held its breath. For though the world awoke, the memory of the night lingered in corners, in alleys, in courtyards that never fully saw daylight. The Subura, with its labyrinth of narrow streets, still vibrated with echoes, the soft padding of footsteps, the faint laughter of lovers, the whisper of a child's sigh remembered from sleep. The walls themselves seemed to hold secrets, breathing them into stone, absorbing every whisper, every shiver, every heartbeat. In one small room above a tavern, an old woman stirred in her bed. She had been awake most of the night, listening to the city, counting the sounds, naming them one by one. Her body was frail, her hands gnarled, yet her ears were keen. She could hear the distant turning of a cart, the scrape of a wheel against the cobblestone, the murmur of water as it fell into the aqueduct channels. She smiled softly, for she knew that every sound carried a story, and every story was alive, even if the teller slept. Nearby, In a darkened hallway of a wealthy patrician's villa, a slave shifted uneasily. He had lain on a pallet of straw, trying to close his eyes, but the creak of marble steps, the faint scent of wine, and the gentle, rhythmic breathing of his master prevented him from resting. He listened instead, absorbing every movement, every whisper. In that listening, he found a strange kind of freedom, a knowledge of the world above him that others ignored. Every sigh, every shuffle, every soft word carried meaning. And in the half-light, he imagined a life beyond service, beyond control, beyond the invisible chains that bound him to another's will. Rome's streets were waking, but some corners remained untouched by sunlight. The alleyways behind the Forum were thick with shadows, cool and fragrant with the scent of damp stone. A cat prowled these streets, moving silently over the uneven cobbles, its yellow eyes reflecting the faint glimmer of the morning sky. The cat's movements were careful, deliberate, each step a soft declaration of independence. It paused, listening to the distant clamor of merchants setting up stalls, and then disappeared into a doorway, leaving only the faint rustle of its passing. Above the Palatine, a senator's villa began to hum with life. A servant swept the stone floors, oiling lamps for the day. Another brought a basin of water for the master, its steam rising into the cold air like smoke from a fire long extinguished. Curtains were drawn, shutters opened, and slowly the golden morning light filled the rooms, illuminating the intricate mosaics and the faint dust dancing in their beams. Yet even in this brightness, the memory of the night remained. The shadows lingered, soft and deliberate, like whispers pressed into the walls, unyielding to the sun. In a distant district near the river, a young boy, still half dreaming, slipped out of his mother's embrace. He ran barefoot along the wet stones, listening to the water as it gurgled past the mills. The Tiber seemed alive, its current carrying not only the refuse of the city but also fragments of its nocturnal dreams. The boy dipped his fingers into the river, feeling the cool flow against his skin. For a fleeting moment, he imagined himself a fisherman, a sailor, a voyager on the endless waters of the world. He laughed quietly to himself, a sound as fragile as glass, and then returned to the streets, ready to greet the day. Even the temples, once heavy with incense and shadow, began to stir. Vesta's eternal flame glimmered in its sanctuary, tended by a Vestal Virgin who moved with quiet reverence. She whispered a prayer, not for wealth or power, but for the city itself, for the sleepers of the night, for the invisible multitude that carried Rome in their breaths. She left the temple, stepping onto the quiet steps, and felt the cool stone beneath her sandals. The city greeted her in silence, acknowledging the duty she bore, a thread between mortal and divine, present and eternal. The streets, now busy with carts, merchants, and beggars, pulsed with life, yet shadows persisted in the corners. A thief crouched against the wall, waiting for the first careless hand to slip a coin or purse. His eyes, dark and alert, caught the sunlight that sliced through the alley. He remembered the night, the lessons of silence, the pathways of stealth, the river of whispered sounds that no one else could perceive. In the brightness, he moved like a shadow still attached to the night, carrying with him its memory, its discipline, its secret rhythm. Across the city, in the Forum, the senators convened. They spoke loudly, their voices echoing across the stone. They debated laws, taxes, conquests. Yet beneath their words ran a quiet undertone, the lingering memory of Knight's counsel. Some spoke with subtle hesitation, their dreams of morality, ambition, and fear shaping their tone. Others moved with confidence, their decisions sharpened by visions they had not understood, by warnings delivered in slumber. The Empire's fate, it seemed, was influenced not only by daylight and reason but by the quiet, unseen hands of night. Even the animals of Rome participated in this awakening. Horses stamped their hooves in stables, their breaths visible in the morning air. Dogs barked, chased one another in alleys, or padded silently beside their masters. Birds rose from their nests, calling to each other in the sharp, clear tones of day. Yet even in their motion, the ghosts of night clung. The echo of cats' paws, the distant howl of a wolf, the soft ripple of water in hidden fountains. The memory of sleep lingered everywhere, a subtle haze upon the awakening city. And the city itself seemed aware, not conscious, not human, but alive in a way that defied understanding. Every wall, every arch, every cobblestone carried the imprint of the night. The whispers of slaves, the sighs of lovers, the fevered visions of emperors, the prayers of the Vestals. Sunlight illuminated these places, but it could not erase them. Rome had grown accustomed to carrying the night within itself, letting it mingle with the day, shaping its rhythm, guiding its heartbeat. From the highest terrace of the Capitoline, one could see the entire city stretching toward the horizon. Temples, baths, forums, taverns, alleys, villas, and streets blended into a living mosaic. Smoke rose from hearths. People moved like ants, yet each carried an invisible weight of memory and dream. The city was awake, yet still contained the soul of the night. And above it all, the sky bloomed into full morning. The sun, bold and golden, struck the marble, igniting it with brilliance. Shadows shrank, rivers gleamed, and life poured into every corner. Rome was awake, a city of sound, motion, ambition, and breath. But beneath the brightness, in the quiet spaces between walls, in the echoes of alleys and corridors, the night still lingered. It whispered, breathed, and remembered. Every sleeper, every shadow, every heartbeat from the night remained imprinted on the city, a silent, invisible layer that would inform every choice, every dream, every desire. Rome never truly woke, for the night never truly left. It existed within the living, within the stones, within the Tiber, within the vast, eternal pulse of the empire. The city was both awake and dreaming, both alive and eternal. It was Rome. It was night remembered. It was day reborn. In the folds of Rome's waking streets, there existed a world unseen by the light of day. Slaves stirred in small quarters above kitchens, rubbing sleep from their eyes, muscles sore from nights of vigilance and service. Some lay awake, listening to the city breathing, counting footsteps on cobblestones, noting the turn of wheels, memorizing the cadence of their master's routines. In this careful attention, there was survival, and sometimes small joy, the knowledge of patterns, the silent understanding that even in a city of immense power, there were threads only they could follow. Children, too, moved in worlds both delicate and vast. Some played barefoot in alleys while their mothers prepared the day's bread. Others stole moments in courtyards, chasing shadows, listening to whispered stories of the previous night. They dreamed long into the morning, carrying fragments of visions that belong neither to history nor to the living, but to the quiet imagination that flourished in corners forgotten by the empire. Even the wealthiest child, in a villa high upon the Palatine, felt the thrill of secret passageways, the thrill of a fleeting shadow across a marble floor, the secret pulse of the city beneath him. Soldiers awoke, with their bodies weary from dreams of battle. Even in peaceful Rome, their minds lingered in distant fields, listening to imagined cries and the echo of hoofbeats on dust. Some remembered the night vividly, visions of victories, losses, omens, and warnings. Others only felt the weight of armor that was no longer present, the ghost of campaigns long past, and the subtle tension in muscles that still believed it might be called to war. For them, the night was both teacher and tormentor, a space where courage, fear, and longing intertwined. Philosophers, meanwhile, walked through the awakening streets as if carrying the night in their pockets. They saw patterns others ignored, the tilt of a column, the placement of a statue, the angle of sunlight on stone, and turned them over in thought. They remembered the quiet wisdom of Somnus and Morpheus, the subtle guidance of shadows, the lessons whispered in dreams. To them, the city was not merely a collection of streets and buildings, but a vast network of meanings, waiting for those patient enough to discern them. Some paused in corners, observing the rhythm of life, and jotted down notes in faded scrolls, half poetic, half philosophical, containing wisdom only the night could inspire. Lovers, scattered across the city, returned to daylight carrying the secret warmth of night encounters. They moved discreetly through sunlit alleys, touching hands beneath the guise of casual greetings, exchanging glances that spoke more eloquently than words ever could. The city had witnessed countless such moments, and yet each felt unique, fragile, sacred. Some lovers were forbidden by law, class, or circumstance. Others were united in fleeting, timeless tenderness. All, however, bore the echo of the night in their hearts, a memory of vulnerability, intimacy, and risk. The invisible lives intertwined like threads of silk in a vast tapestry. Slaves observed the movements of masters, children caught fleeting lessons from hidden play, soldiers absorbed omens and portents from dreams, philosophers catalogued hidden patterns, and lovers navigated both passion and secrecy. These lives were fragile, easily overlooked, yet they composed the subtle heartbeat of Rome, a pulse that could not be measured by law, coin, or conquest. Even the animals of the city, dogs, cats, birds, rats, and the occasional wolf that had crept through the Tiber's shadows, carried this memory of the night. Each carried instinct shaped by darkness, each moved through the waking world with traces of the unseen. The city's pulse was animal as much as human, a rhythm of breath, footstep, and heartbeat intertwined with stone, water, and air. As the sun rose fully over Rome, the city was alive with sound, yet beneath the surface flowed the silent residue of night. Each life carried the shadow of dreams, whispers, and encounters that had occurred while the city slept. For some, the echo was gentle, a lingering sense of calm, a quiet understanding, or inspiration for the day ahead. For others, it was uneasy, an unresolved fear, a warning remembered too late, a longing for what could not be. Merchants opened their stalls with brisk motions, unaware of the dreams that had brushed against their lives. Children ran through alleys, their laughter a continuation of the night's secret music. Servants moved efficiently, their bodies trained by countless nights of observation and discipline. Soldiers marched, carrying the faint tremor of dreams of war and heroism. Philosophers observed, recording, thinking, interpreting, while lovers met discreetly, their hearts still humming the rhythm of moonlit intimacy. Even the city itself seemed aware. Rome's streets, aqueducts, temples, and fountains retained the weight of the night. Every shadow that had lingered, every whisper that had passed, every secret meeting or private contemplation. The city carried this weight with subtlety. It did not announce it, yet those attuned could perceive it in the alignment of sun and column, the path of a stray dog, the murmur of the Tiber. The city was awake, yet it remained a vessel of the night's memory. Some who walked the streets felt it instinctively. A poet paused on a terrace, sensing invisible rhythm in the patterns of people moving below. A philosopher noted the contrast between light and shadow, understanding that knowledge often came not from observation alone but from the unseen impressions of darkness. A slave stole a glance at a master, recalling an insight gleaned from last night's silence. Lovers shared subtle gestures that had been rehearsed in secrecy. The city whispered lessons only the patient and attentive could perceive. Time in Rome moved differently when viewed through this lens. Each day was a continuation of the night before, and each night, in turn, drew upon the fragments of days past. The empire, immense and sprawling, was not merely a political or military entity. It was a living organism composed of countless small stories, interwoven dreams, and hidden movements. Every street, every wall, every window was alive with history, memory, and anticipation. Even emperors felt this. Though they commanded legions and dictated laws, they could not control the invisible currents of Rome's nocturnal life. Dreams, shadows, omens, and memories shaped their choices as much as decrees or speeches. The pulse of the city, like a hidden river, guided the empire in subtle and sometimes unknowable ways. And as the sun rose higher, casting the final long shadows into narrow streets, Rome stood fully awake, magnificent, sprawling, and endlessly alive. Yet the night persisted, quietly, invisibly, within every corner, every life, every heartbeat. The city's memory of darkness was eternal, informing its pulse, guiding its rhythm, shaping the lives of all who moved within its embrace. Rome, awake and alive, carried the night within it. It was both ordinary and divine, human and eternal, fragile and immortal. The city never slept, because the night had never truly left.